In this video, I want to have a workbook where I force my user to activate macros. In this case, it's a normal workbook. Then I've added this sheet, which is simply going to tell the user to enable macros before they can continue. I need two macros, one that runs when I open the workbook, which is going to unhide the normal sheets and hide this sheet. And likewise, I need a macro that runs when I close the workbook, which is then going to hide these sheets and unhide this sheet. I need to add code to this workbook in order to have it run when I start or close. And in order to access the actual workbook events, I go up in this first list, say workbook, and conveniently workbook open is the first option. When I open up the workbook, I only have this enable macros sheet visible, which I've given the code name force macros, such that the user can change the name of this sheet and it won't impact the code. I need to loop through all of my sheets and make them visible, and at the end I hide the force macros sheet. I'm also going to turn off screen updating, and that's usually a good idea because it can look a bit glitchy when VBA is doing a bunch of actions at once. Then I can turn it off at the end. The actual code is simple. I simply need to loop through all sheets and make them visible again. And the visible function uses enumerations, these code words that actually behind the scenes are numbers. I want to use visible because I'm making them visible. We can see what number this text corresponds to. In this case, it's -1. Now we've looped through all the sheets and made them visible. Then I want to make the force macro sheet invisible. Here I want to use sheet very hidden, such that the user can right click and say unhide sheets. They won't see it. This needs to be last because I can make it invisible at the start. I always need to have at least one sheet be visible. Since this is a Workbook Open-event, I can run it like any other macro. I can step through it with F8, but all of these sheets are visible anyway. And now it's going to make the first page invisible. And because analysis is the first sheet, it's going to activate that. We could add that at the end. Even if you change the order of sheets, you always start at the analysis sheet. And it's always a good idea to test code, and yes, that's fine. In order to test the Workbook Close event, we can't run it like the Open event because the function is going to actually close the workbook, but we can copy the code from another sub. I can then go up in the second list and say I want to add code before close, and I want that at the bottom. Likewise, I want to turn off screen updating and I want to re-enable it. I don't know if this gets saved in the workbook, so I want to be sure. I also need to make sure to save my workbook before I close it, because when you hit the end sub portion, it's actually going to close. Meaning if you don't save, well, you don't save, but actually the code is the same. It's simply changing whether you turn it visible or invisible, and I don't need that. I need to start out by making the force macros sheet visible, and then I need to make sure I don't make it invisible inside the code here. We'll change this to very hidden. But first I need to add that condition. I choose to use the code name option because then the user can change the name of the actual sheet, which is enable macros. This is simply to be a bit more robust. If this is true, then I want to do nothing, and otherwise I want the sheet to be invisible. And then we end with endif. I can copy this to a new sub, and then we can run through it. Because I've already prepared the workbook, so it's similar to when we run the Workbook Open macro. And then I can F8 through it. We start out by making that sheet visible. And actually, since screen updating is turned off, I don't see that happen. I can temporarily turn that on again. And then I can pull the arrow back to repeat it. And actually, no, I needed that to be not hidden. I needed it to be visible. It was very good. I chose to test that. That's the problem with copying code. Now enable macros is visible. And in the first instance, force macros was true, but in the next sheets, it isn't true. And I don't have to activate the specific sheet because right now there's only one sheet left. Then we save it, turn back screen updating, and then it's done. Then actually I'm going to leave this because now we can copy it. Now I can save. And then we can try closing, and we didn't see anything happen. Now if I open it, we can see that actually because I already enabled macros on this workbook, it automatically activated macros. And actually when I copied this workbook, I also enabled macros, and the workbook is going to remember that I enabled macros, but we can temporarily turn that off. The easiest way to get that bar back where the user has to click enable macros is to change the name of the file. Then when we open it, we get this pop-up where I want to say enable macros, and then everything works. And I did want to get that yellow pop-up, which you normally get.
5 minutes later.
And now I actually get it. So I am a bit confused at what I have to do to get this bar, but in any case, it's fine now. So I am very satisfied. And that's actually everything. So, yep,